Friends, I bring you the loving greetings of the Universal House of Justice. At the last meeting that I attended, the members asked me to convey their love whenever the friends are gathered, and I am able to meet with them. So these greetings come from the Supreme Body to each one of you. The youth at the Baha'i World Center, purely on their own initiative, decided to have a 24-hour, round-the-clock prayer vigil for the entire duration of our trip, which will be some 35 days, and has already taken us to Europe, then to United States. This is our first meeting, main gathering of the friends, to Canada, back to the United States, then on to Europe for the rest of the countries specified by the House of Justice. Out of the 35 days, about half of that period we are spending in the United States. So that shows you the importance that the House of Justice attaches to the American Baha'i community. In the United States, we shall be having 6 regional meetings such as this one, and it is indeed highly significant, I think, that this first meeting should be held in the vicinity of the City of the Covenant, and that the last meeting, the last regional meeting, will be under the shadow of the Mother Temple of the West in Wilmette. It occurred to me that maybe the best thing to do to start our discussion tonight is to remind ourselves of some of the immortal words of Shoghi Effendi about the American Baha'i community. There are so many that I decided to make a little compilation, and that compilation came to about 14 pages of nothing but praise about the American Baha'i community. So from those 14 pages, I finally decided to choose only 3 passages, which I will read to you. Referring to the American Baha'i community, this is what our beloved guardian has written. The first to awaken to the call of the new day in the Western world. The first to spontaneously arise, to befittingly erect the Mother Temple of the West. The first to grasp the implications, evolve the pattern, and lay the basis of the structure of the Baha'i administrative order in the entire Baha'i world. The first to openly and systematically proclaim the fundamental principles of the faith. The first to champion the cause of the oppressed and to generously contribute to the alleviation of the sufferings of the needy and the persecuted among the followers of Baha'u'llah. The first to inaugurate collective enterprises for the propagation of his cause. The first to assert its independence in the West. A second passage enumerates the titles of the American Baha'i community that Shoghi Effendi conferred upon this very privileged community throughout the world. the spiritual descendants of the dawn breakers of the heroic age of the Baha'i faith, the chief repository of the immortal tablets of Abdul Baha's divine plan, the former executors of the mandate issued by the Center of Baha'u'llah's Covenant, the champion builders of a divinely conceived administrative order, the standard bearers of the all-conquering army of the Lord of Hosts, the torch bearers of a future divinely inspired world civilization. And the third passage is this one. This third passage seems to have been written last night. At so critical a period, at so challenging an hour, the members of a community invested by Abdul Baha with a primacy which can, through neglect and apathy, be allowed to lose its vital power and driving force, now stand at the crossroads, unable to relax for a moment or hesitate as to which road they should tread, or to allow any decline in the high standard they have undeviatingly upheld. Nay, if this primacy is to be safeguarded and enhanced, a consecration not only on the part of a chosen few and a pouring out of substance not only by those of limited means, but by the richest and wealthiest, are imperative and can brook no delay. I truly feel humble to be standing before you, representatives of the Baha'i community, counselors serving in the North American continent, and members of the National Spiritual Assembly of this very envied community of Baha'is. As you know, the purpose of this meeting and the other meetings is to discuss with you the importance and implications of the ARC project. On March 17, 1995, the House of Justice sent this message to your National Spiritual Assembly. Deeply concerned, Review ARC Projects Fund indicates rate flow contributions lamentably low. If outpouring funds not sharply accelerated, three-year plan goal will not be attained, with damaging consequences, progress, vital project. $40 million needed course this final year of plan. Essential take further steps through series well-planned, well-attended meetings, friends, in North America and Europe, addressed by Member Universal House of Justice. Why has the House of Justice decided to send one of its members to only North America and Europe? That is a question that I think is a legitimate one. The reason is very simple. It is that the way that our national communities are throughout the world, financially, they reflect the financial condition of the country in which that community resides. The House of Justice reviewed the conditions of the Baha'i communities throughout the world. And at one point, the suggestion was made that it may be a good idea for all 9 members to go out and urge the friends everywhere about the needs of the fund. But it was soon realized that the Baha'is, let us say in the third world, were doing their utmost. The maximum efforts were being exerted by them. And to send a House member to them, all right, they may increase their contributions by 5%. Will this fill the need for the 40 millions? It won't. So they said it's better to send only 1 member to countries where the potential is great, so that we get quick results and better results. You know, it's like a team, a football team, and you have 11 players, and you have 3 stars in that team, and the rest are good, but they are not excellent. They are average, and maybe a little bit mediocre. And they're doing their best. They're running, they're perspiring, they're doing everything they can. And the coach sees this. But he also sees that 3 of those stars who can do so much more, and they're not, that they need a little bit of nudging so that the team will win. I've come here for this little nudging. And you are one of the stars. In fact, the superstar. Now, you might also ask the question, why is this project so vital? Why is it so important? Is it because it is at the World Center? Is it because we are creating institutions which will be silent teachers of the cause? Yes, this is all true. But there are other considerations apart from this. This entire project, we must remember, is associated with Baha'u'llah himself. Baha'u'llah, towards the end of his life, as you very well know, came to the mountain of the Lord, this historic mountain. On that mountain, he revealed the Tablet of Carmel, a tablet which has been described by Shoghi Effendi as the charter of the institutions to be established at the World Center. He went to the top of the mountain, what Shoghi Effendi described as the head of the mountain, and he revealed his tablet there. In that tablet, he refers to the city of God, as well as the Ark of God, Ark with a K. And Shoghi Effendi explained during his ministry that the city of God in the Tablet of Carmel referred to the shrine of the Bab, and that the Ark of God referred to the world administrative seat of the faith to be established on Mount Carmel. So he clearly envisaged the establishment of both a spiritual center on the mountain to be the shrine of the Bab, the spot where the remains of the Bab would be interred, and a shrine would be built, and the administrative center, which would be the nerve center of the Baha'i world, the administrative heart of the Baha'i world. He also went to the spot where the shrine is now built, and to Abdul Baha he pointed. Shoghi Effendi used to even use his own finger to say he pointed with his finger the very spot where the shrine had to be built. Abdul Baha, after Baha'u'llah, implemented the wish of his illustrious father, Baha'u'llah. He bought land, he started excavating the foundations and built 6 rooms, had the remains of the Bab transferred to Mount Carmel, interred in the very heart of that mountain, the very spot that Baha'u'llah had designated. He was there. Shoghi Effendi, as a young man, was there on that day. And this began a process on this holy mountain. And later on, of course, Shoghi Effendi came, and he further implemented these plans by buying more land, by specifying exactly where the administrative center was to be established, transferred the remains of the brother of the greatest holy leaf, the purest branch, and their mother, and had these two blessed souls, the remains of these blessed souls interred next to the resting place of the greatest holy leaf, and created this arc around these monuments, these resting places, and started planning for the first edifice to be around that arc, which was the archives building. On the terrace issue, Abdul Baha had already given his vision about the future. 9 terraces from the shrine to the foot of the mountain, 9 terraces from the shrine to the top of the mountain. And Shoghi Effendi did the first part, symbolically, in a rudimentary way, by linking the shrine to the German colony, the colony of the Templars. This is all history. The reason why I'm telling you this is for us to realize that we are being called upon, friends, by the House of Justice to help in continuing this process which was begun by Baha'u'llah, which is associated with the Bab, and which is also associated with both Abdul Baha as well as Shoghi Effendi. All 4, if you like, principal luminaries of our faith have been involved in some way, at some time, with a project which we are now, you and I, are being called upon by the House of Justice to support. While it is true that we are now doing this at this time when there are so many problems in the United States, let us say financially, it's true. It's not only here, it's also in Europe. But the House of Justice had to go ahead and carry out this plan without any further delay. So, in addition to asking why now, we may also ask, why is this such a vast, extensive project, why do we have to build the buildings, the edifices, as well as the terraces? Couldn't we have built the terraces later, for example? You know, I would like to go back very briefly to the years in the early 70s, 1970. I'm very glad that my good brother, Dr. Ru, is here, who can remember the consultations at the time in the Universal House of Justice. When you look at the mountainside, you see that the Baha'is own some 60 acres of property on the very face of that mountain. In its very heart is this shrine, the superstructure built by the Guardian, the original shrine built by Abdul Baha. And then there was this very symbolic stairway from the shrine to the German colony. On the one hand, the municipality was concerned. There was burgeoning development on both sides of this property. What were the Baha'is going to do about this? We could say, all right, we could drag our feet and say, listen, we'll have some plans for the future. In fact, we did show some of the plans in a very rudimentary way that were designed at the time to satisfy the municipality. But nothing was done actually on the mountainside. One could argue that we could go on indefinitely dragging our feet. There was another imperative, and that was the question of space, office space. At the time, there were about maybe 10 staff members in Haifa working in the office. Now we have over 600. So there was a problem of space. One could argue also, all right, you could rent some space. There are a lot of apartments and office buildings in Haifa and so on. You could do that. That's also true. Then there is yet another imperative which overshadowed these two. And that was the text that we had before us from the beloved Guardian, which tied the hands of the House of Justice. I will read you this passage. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Some of you may also know it by heart. It was written by the Guardian in the early 50s. The raising of this edifice, referring to the archives building, will in turn herald the construction in the course of successive epochs of the formative age of the faith of several other structures which will serve as administrative seats of divinely appointed institutions. Then he goes on naming the institutions. These edifices will, in the shape of a far-flung arc and following a harmonizing style of architecture. This is another place where the Guardian tied the hands of the House of Justice. Following a harmonizing style of architecture, surround the resting places of the greatest holy leaf, of her brother, and of their mother. The ultimate completion of this stupendous undertaking will mark the culmination of the development of a worldwide, divinely appointed administrative order whose beginnings may be traced as far back as the concluding years of the heroic age of the faith. Then, this vast and irresistible process, notice the word irresistible, this vast and irresistible process, unexampled in the spiritual history of mankind, and which will synchronize with two no less significant developments, the establishment of the lesser peace and the evolution of Baha'i national and local institutions. All right. So, as Shoghi Effendi visualized it, there was a synchronization of three processes. You can think of them as three rivers flowing simultaneously towards a certain point. The evolution of national assemblies, Baha'i national assemblies, and local assemblies. The development of the ark by raising the edifices around it and completing these edifices by a certain time, and then the process of the lesser peace. Here comes Abdul Baha, and again ties the hands of the House of Justice. How does he do that? Way back at the beginning of the century, in 1906, he writes a letter over his own signature and very clearly intimates that this universal peace, this unity of the nations, will be established during this century. And he makes it very clear that it is the 20th century. And he's asked questions about that, and he confirms that it is the 20th Gregorian century. So now the House of Justice, now I'm going back to 1970. I'm going back to the early years of the 70s. They realized that, well, we had about 30 years to play with. But we had to make haste. So we had to do something. We had to start somewhere. And the House of Justice decided that the first building should be the seat of the Universal House of Justice, which was begun in 1973 and was completed in 1983. It took 10 years to build. So after it was completed, the question was again raised, what are we going to do about the rest? So the House of Justice asked Mr. Amonat again to devise plans for the other buildings. And then something else happened, and the question of the terraces was raised, and Mr. Sahba had just completed the Indian temple. He was in Haifa, and the two architects consulted, and it was very clear that these two projects had to go hand in hand. The reason is very simple. The mountain, Mount Carmel, is like this. On one side, it's high, where these buildings have to be erected, and on this side, it's low. So if we were to build the edifices alone, we had to do a lot of excavation here, then spend a lot of money for the transportation of these excavated material. And then later on, maybe sometime during the 21st century, when we want to build the terraces, we have to pay a lot of money to buy landfill and put it here in order to create the terraces on a level. So they consulted, and it was very clear that the best thing would be to transport this landfill from one side to the other. And this would be the least expensive to the Baha'i world. We did not realize at that time what an important decision was being taken by the House of Justice. Because when the plans were presented to the municipality, they said, wonderful. We will approve all your building permits now because you are helping in making this mountainside a beautiful line 1 kilometer long from the top of the mountain to the foot of the mountain of beautiful hanging gardens with waterfalls, with all kinds of landscaping and trees and flower beds. That's it. So all our plans for the buildings went through the municipal authorities and the district authorities with relatively great ease, because we were doing something for the beauty of Mount Carmel, not only erecting few buildings. What were these buildings? These buildings, first was the extension to the archives building. What Shoghi Effendi had built was indeed only adequate for display of holy relics and holy tablets, not for preservation. All these holy tablets now are not in the archives building that you see. They are all stored in a strong room specially built in the seat of the House of Justice itself, in a very small, compact area. So the first thing that had to be done was to build an extension to the archives building with a strong room which would be 10 times greater and wider than the small strong room we have in the seat, where everything has been congested and put together. Very difficult to find sometimes because it's all put on top of each other, and it takes a lot of time. But when it's all spread, when we have a lot of space in the extension of the archives building, they will be preserved for all time. So the extension, this Center for the Study of the Texts, and the building for the teaching center. And then the terraces. This is the situation. So we had to have it that vast for this reason. Now, why is it so costly? One may ask. Okay, let us look at the cost. This seat of the House of Justice which, as I said, was completed in 1983, cost the Baha'i world $27 million. All right. If we had built or were building now the seat of the House of Justice as part of this scheme for the ARC projects, we asked for a survey, for a study to be made. How much would it cost if we were going to build the seat now? And the figure was $80 million instead of 27, if the contract would be given to an outside contractor. All right. We looked at the floor space of the seat and the floor space of these buildings that were being erected. And we found that the floor space of the new buildings is 5 times more than the floor space of the seat of the House of Justice. 5 times more. So $80 million times 5 would be $400 million. Our estimate that we are working on now is $250 million. Now, if you consider that we are building all these things, including the terraces, and all that goes with the terraces, for $250 million by the end of the century. When you realize that today in the military world, some of the governments are spending money on one aircraft only, which costs several times more than the $250 million we are spending on our projects. And what is the life expectancy of such aircraft? 15 years. After that, it's scrap, metal. This project is for the duration of the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. Look at the Parthenon. It is there. It was built before Christ. It's been there for 2,400 years. It's still standing in full glory. We're not building for 50 years and 100 years. We're building for 1,000 years and beyond. Probably it will go beyond this dispensation and will go into the next dispensation. These buildings will still be there. This is the project that the House of Justice is calling upon us to support. I would like to read you my note here, because if I start expounding on it, it will take time. So I'll just read you my note in the interest of time. We must be very careful not to misinterpret or misrepresent Shoghi Effendi's statement, which I just read to you. Abdul Baha said on more than one occasion that the lesser peace would emerge during this century. And it is clear that he meant the 20th century, according to the Gregorian calendar. Shoghi Effendi clarified that this emergence, now this is very important for us to remember, that this emergence of the lesser peace would require to be consolidated, and that this consolidation would take place in the course of future epochs of the formative age of the faith. Now, this is not in any of his English letters. It is in one of the letters he wrote to the Baha'is in the East. And those of us who speak Persian would undoubtedly be familiar with that letter of the beloved guardian. Shoghi Effendi, in the above message that I just read to you, is making another prediction, namely that these three processes will synchronize. The establishment of the lesser peace, if you think about it, cannot just come about in a very quiet, in a very imperceptible way. It's going to call for all kinds of convulsions in the world before it can emerge. And we are facing these years of convulsion. We are in them. And it is also, in a way, mysterious that every time there is a major undertaking of the Baha'is, it coincides with and synchronizes with difficulties in the world. The shrine of the Bab. Abdul Baha was incarcerated in Akka while he was planning the building of the shrine of the Bab. It was difficult, money-wise, freedom-wise. He was hemmed in with problems. Look at the temple in Wilmette, with what great difficulty during the depression and the financial problems in the United States. This had to be built, and all the Baha'is of the world joined in to help build this temple in Wilmette. Think of the seat of the House of Justice. Think of the superstructure of the shrine of the Bab. All these always were accompanied by problems in Iran, elsewhere. So now we are at this stage. We are faced with a crisis, friends. It's a major crisis. It is because of this crisis that the House of Justice has decided to send one of its members to you. Finally, my note here tells me Shoghi Effendi is not making any one of these three processes dependent upon any of the other two. Now, we don't have time to go into all these things. I referred also to the way that Shoghi Effendi refers to a harmonizing style of architecture. He wants a monumental style. So we realized that any building on the mountain had to be in aesthetic harmony with the archives building and the shrine. We couldn't just have an ordinary modern office building placed on the mountainside. It wouldn't work. It wasn't according to the wish of Shoghi Effendi. And we had to respect that wish, that inspired wish of the beloved guardian. We move on. What about the crying needs of humanity? Shouldn't the Baha'is be using whatever funds they have to help the needy? How does the laying of stones and marble on Mount Carmel help the sufferings of humanity? Now, this question has also been asked. But I want you to be fully assured that the House of Justice is fully aware of the sufferings of humanity, of the problems, the earthquakes, the disasters, the droughts, the needs here and there. Every time there is a major disaster, the House of Justice sends money, however small, but they send money from the limited resources that they have to the National Assembly of that country in order that they may contribute towards the relief work. They do that. But if we spend all that money for the relief work, who will do the work of the cause? Who will erect these structures and these terraces on Mount Carmel? We don't accept money from anybody, from any government. But there are many governments in the world, many organizations that have earmarked funds, have actually resources for specifically such purposes. We were reading an article a few months ago where a study had been made of the funds that were being spent in countries such as Somaliland and Ethiopia and so on. And they found that actually only 43% of the money was reaching the grassroots. In between, the money was being wasted, being squandered, unwittingly or deliberately, and that's the situation. And you want us to take your money and spend it in this way? Only 43% to filter through and leave the work of the cause on Mount Carmel and the wishes of Abdul Baha and Baha'u'llah and everything else? How can we do that? We have to go ahead. And we help as much as we can. Now, to understand this, we must also realize that the world that we see around us is disintegrating. And this is part of the plan of God. We can't help it. By sending extra dollars here and there, we're not going to arrest the disintegration of present world society. If you further think about it, you will realize that the reason for this disintegration of society is because of the appearance of the cause of Baha'u'llah and the emergence of his new world order. Can't we hear Baha'u'llah saying the world's equilibrium hath been upset through the emergence of the new world order of Baha'u'llah? Mankind's ordered life has been disturbed because of that. Doesn't Baha'u'llah say the time for the destruction of the world and its peoples hath arrived? The day is approaching when we will have rolled up the world and all that is therein, and spread out a new order in its stead. When the appointed hour hath come, there shall suddenly appear that which shall cause the limbs of mankind to quake. Then, and only then, will the divine standard be unfurled. We're now weaving that divine standard. Then and only then will the divine standard be unfurled, and the nightingale of paradise warble its melody. This is what we read in the writings. It's a crumbling order that we are watching before our eyes. And what are we building on Mount Carmel? We are building institutions to support the supreme body of the faith. A body which Shoghi Effendi says will be the last refuge of a tottering civilization. That's what we are trying to create on Mount Carmel. And this is the destiny, this is the privilege of our generation, to be able to contribute towards this historic project. a project that will never be repeated again. Future generations will not be able to participate in this project. It would be already done, finished. Earlier generations could not have done it because it wasn't the time. We are the privileged generation that is being called upon by Baha'u'llah himself, believe me, to help in creating this seat of his throne on Mount Carmel. I would like to say a few words, if I may, about contributions. At the time when Shoghi Effendi and the American Baha'i community, with the help of the Baha'is of the world, was erecting the temple in Wilmette, this is what he wrote, 1949. Thank you very much. Thank you. This is going to help. Thank you. He wrote this: this campaign cannot yield its richest fruit unless and until the community in its entirety participates in this nationwide sacrificial effort. Nor can this collective effort be blessed to the fullest extent possible unless the contributions made by its members involve acts of self-abnegation, not only on the part of those of modest means, but also by those endowed with substantial resources. Again, all, no matter how modest their resources, must participate upon the degree of self-sacrifice involved in these individual contributions will directly depend the efficacy and the spiritual influence which these institutions will exert. What is Shoghi Effendi telling us? He's telling us that, yes, money is needed, and we need money to create these institutions and buildings and gardens or whatever. But the influence that what we are creating will have upon the world will be enhanced if, when giving, there is an element of sacrifice involved. This component, when added to the contribution, the outcome is that the efficacy, the spiritual efficacy of these institutions will increase, will be augmented, will be enhanced. This is not what we are saying, what Shoghi Effendi is telling us. I thought a great deal about this. I said, how is this possible? I suddenly remembered that once Abdul Baha said, when he was having a meal at a house here in the United States, he said, this food is especially delicious because it has been prepared with love. I said, that's the point, maybe. And then I remembered the food I ate and enjoyed when prepared by my mother. It tasted different. And I'm sure all of us have experienced the same thing. What mother prepared was not only because of the excellence of the cookbook, because it was of herself. She mixed love with it. And that's why it tasted differently. And I'm sure we all have had this experience. This is what Shoghi Effendi, I think, is talking about. He wants sacrifice to be combined with the cash that we offer. All right. So this is one point I wanted to make. I would like us also to review very quickly some of the important passages in the writings of Baha'u'llah on wealth, as well as on poverty, on the rich, as well as the poor. So I will take a little bit of your time reading some of the passages. I promise not to read everything, but only the most important ones. On wealth, from Baha'u'llah, having attained the stage of fulfillment and reached his maturity, man standeth in need of wealth. Know ye in truth that wealth is a mighty barrier. So it is necessary, but it's also a barrier, a mighty barrier, between the seeker and his desire, the lover and his beloved. In earthly riches, fear is hidden, and peril is concealed. Abdul Baha, the riches of this world resemble hills of sand, which the wind moveth every day from place to place. Today, you see some sand in one place. The next day, you see that it hath completely vanished, and no trace of it remaineth. The wind hath blown the sand to another place, some 2 miles away, and hath formed another heap. In brief, riches are like unto movable hills of sand. They come and go. Therefore, to the people of understanding, they have no significance. See what Baha'u'llah says about the poor, and what is his advice to the poor. Great is the blessedness awaiting the poor that endure patiently and conceal their sufferings. Please God, the poor may exert themselves and strive to earn the means of livelihood. And Shoghi Effendi adds, all, no matter how modest their resources, must participate, referring to contributions to the fund. So there are 4 points that are being made here. The poor are told, be patient. They are told also to earn their means of livelihood. They are told to conceal their poverty. They are also told to contribute, to give in the path of his love. The poor. No proof of one's faith, certitude, firmness, and steadfastness compareth with that of giving in the path of God. This was from Abdul Baha. Again from Abdul Baha. If ye are poor, God out of his bounty will enrich you. Verily, he is potent over all things. Soon will God compensate with the best reward those who believe and give of their substance in his path. And he will cause them to enter his most holy and everlasting paradise. The giving of the poor is, of course, a sacrifice. And this is why it opens doors, because it's mixed with sacrifice. I remember a story of a young man in Akka in the days of Abdul Baha, had lost his job. He was poor. He went to Abdul Baha and said, "What shall I do? Please pray for me." Abdul Baha's answer was, "Give of your substance in the path of God." He had nothing. He comes home, he thinks, "What shall I do? I have these few little monies, and I have budgeted this for so many days until I find a new job. I have no money." He waits for a whole week, strives very hard to find a job, no success. He went back to Abdul Baha. He said, "Please, I have not found my job. I'm in trouble. Please help me. Please pray for me." Abdul Baha looked at him. He said, "I told you, give in the path of God." The poor man comes back again, thinks, what is he going to do? He looks around. Yeah, he's got this frame in which he has a nice picture. I have that frame. He has few objects on the shelves here and there for ornamentation. He can sell them. He immediately puts these things together. The next morning he goes to the second-hand shop and sells them. He has his cash in his hand. He's happy. He comes back home. He sees two men standing at his door. Where are you? We have been looking for you. This morning we decided we had a job for you and you are just the right man for it. This is a story which demonstrates to us how God interferes in our lives, how God takes hold of our hand, how God comes and changes our lives. They asked one of the imams, they said, "How did you know God?" He said, "By the way, he changes my decisions." By that he meant, by the way, he interferes in my life. Blessed are those who allow God to interfere in their lives. And we do that by inviting him, not with words, with deeds, through sacrifice. That's how we invite him to come into our lives. And when he comes into our lives, he changes, transforms our lives. And we receive blessings. Doors which were closed begin to open. And we find totally new paths for progress and advancement, both materially and spiritually. Let's leave the poor for a moment. Let's go to the rich. Baha'u'llah. Well is it with him who, being rich, is not hindered by his riches from the eternal kingdom, nor deprived by them of imperishable dominion. By the most great name, the splendor of such a wealthy man shall illuminate the dwellers of heaven, even as the sun enlightens the people of the earth. Baha'u'llah again. Rejoice not in the things ye possess. Tonight they are yours. Tomorrow others will possess them. Thus warneth you he who is the all-knowing, the all-informed. We see you rejoicing in that which ye have amassed for others, and shutting out yourselves from the worlds which naught except my guarded tablet can reckon. You know, the House of Justice has received many letters from the Friends. They say this "for" should be a mistake. In that which you have amassed for others, surely it should be from others. Well, we checked, it is clearly for others. In other words, we amass wealth and we think it's for us, but it's for others that we're doing it. The treasures ye have laid up have drawn you far away from your ultimate objective. Again, Baha'u'llah, would the people of the world who have amassed riches and have debarred themselves from the truth know to whom their treasures will be passed on. nay, by the reality of Baha, no one knoweth save exalted be He. Delight not yourselves in the things of the world and its vain ornaments. He will ere long bring to naught all the things that ye possess. From Abdul Baha. Well is it with the rich one who hath not been hindered by worldly possessions from entering the celestial realm. Ye shall not attain unto righteousness unless ye expend that which ye love. Fit for sacrifice is the priceless gift, not that which is paltry. I'd like to read to you this paragraph from one of the tablets of Abdul Baha about a Baha'i from Baku, Azerbaijan. He was a millionaire. Agha Musa Nakhjavání. He had a piece of land. He had debts. He begged Abdul Baha for prayers and blessings. Abdul Baha promised that he will pray. Oil oozed out of his land. He became a millionaire. He asked one of the Russian architects to draw a design for the Mashriq al-Askar of Baku. He took the design with him to the Holy Land and showed it to Abdul Baha. And Abdul Baha approved it and told him to go ahead and build the Mashriq al-Askar in Baku. This would have been the second one after Ashgabat. He comes back, he's busy with this, busy with that, expanding his business, extending here, there. Too many people have salaries that they claim from him. The friends remind him of his promises. Yes, of course, he's going to do it. You think he was not a believer? Of course he was. Do you think he did not love Abdul Baha? Of course he did. Do you think he really did not want to fulfill his promise? Of course he did. But this is wealth. This is what it does. Today, next week, next month, and so on. He died without doing anything. Now, this paragraph I'm going to read to you, it's about him, from the pen of Abdul Baha. Agha Musa did not succeed during his lifetime to establish and build the Mashriq al-Askar in Baku. Also, as you know, I did not accept from him anything. Had he reared this mighty institution, unimaginable would have been its effects in this world and the next. Now his wealth hath been appropriated by those who, as you say, he would not have allowed to enter his house, and whom he abhorred. Take heed, O people of insight. God be praised. The wealthy believers' intense attachment to the riches of this world hindereth them from exerting a mighty effort and rendering a befitting service. But ironically, after their death, their enemies lay hand on their wealth. They squander it, and as the common people say, they joyfully offer a prayer of blessing. I would like to have your permission to read this passage in Persian to those of us in the audience who are Persian Baha'is. آقا موسی علیه الرحمت و الرضوان در ایام حیات موفق نشد که مشرق الاسکار در بادکوبه تأسیس و انشا نماید و من نیز شما میدانید که از او هیچ چیز قبول نکردم، ولی اگر او این بنیان عظیم برپا می نمود، حال در ملک و ملکوت چه تأثیری حاصل می نمود؟ حال اموال را نفوسی می برند که به قول شما راضی نبود که در خانه او وارد شوند و نهایت نفرت را از اون نفوس داشت. فاعتبروا یا اولی الابصار، سبحان الله، اغنیای احبا همتی ننمایند، خدمتی نکنند، از بس تعلق به این اموال دنیا دارند، ولی به تصادف بعد از وفات اموالشان در دست دشمنان آنان می افتد، می خورند و به قول عوام فاتحه می خوانند. These are the words of Abdul Baha. I would like also, with your permission, to read that beautiful passage about wealth being like shifting sands. May I? ثروت دنیا مانند تپه‌های رمل است. رمل یعنی شن که بادها هر روز از جایی به جایی دیگر نقل می نماید. امروز در مکانی ملاحظه می کنی که تپه‌ای از ریگ تشکیل شده. فردا می نگری که این تپه به کلی پراکنده و متلاشی، اثری باقی نه. باد برده و در 2 فرسخی در موقع دیگر از این ریگ تپه‌ای تشکیل شده. خلاصه ثروت و غنا مانند تپه‌های سیار ریگ است، می آید و می رود، لذا ابداً در نزد اهل دانش اهمیتی ندارد. قربانتون برم، شما تفکر بفرمایید در این بیانات مبارکه. All right, we have to continue. All right, I would like also to read to you this passage from one of the writings of Shoghi Effendi, written in June 1954. It is addressed to the American believers. It is therefore imperative for the individual American believer, and particularly for the affluent, the independent, the comfort-loving, and those obsessed by material pursuits, to step forward and dedicate their resources, their time, their very lives to a cause of such transcendence that no human eye can even dimly perceive its glory. Let them resolve instantly and unhesitatingly to place each according to his circumstances, his share on the altar of Baha'is sacrifice, lest on a sudden, unforeseen calamities rob them of a considerable portion of the earthly things they have amassed. All right. I would like to read to you, now I think we can close the chapter about wealth and poverty, okay? I just have two more points. Are you tired? Yeah? No? Shall I continue? All right. Now, yes, sir. Listen to this. Written by Shoghi Effendi 2 months and a few days after the passing of Abdul Baha, in January 19 22. Ruhiya Khanum quotes this in The Priceless Pearl. The time has come for the friends the world over to think not as to how they should serve the cause, but how the cause should be served. See the difference? The difference is very clear to me. One is, what should I do to serve the cause? Well, I think about it. I say, well, I can give so much. I can do that much. It depends upon my circumstances, of course. I have to be very careful about this and that and the other thing. So I'm all the time thinking of what I must be doing, considering my circumstances, my needs, my conditions. I become the center. The other that he wants us to be, or to act in that way, is to make the cause the center and to say, what does the cause need? So the center becomes the cause of God. I thought so much about this passage, and one day it occurred to me, I got it. I'm going to share with you my thought. You may not approve, you may not accept, doesn't matter. I'm going to share it with you. I thought of the mother. I said, we have all had mothers. There are many mothers sitting here in this distinguished audience. We know what a mother is. Listen, I'm a father, I know. There's a big difference between fathers and mothers. Big difference. What does a mother do? A mother thinks of his child. The child is the center of her life. The needs of the child, what the child needs, that's uppermost. It's not that it's 10 o'clock or 8 o'clock or midnight or how is it I'm going to have a sleepless night. It does not matter. And the next day the mother is not going to boast about it, brag about it, even talk about it. She does all these things out of love for the child. Shoghi Effendi says this is the infant faith of God. We have to see what this infant faith needs. We have to be mothers. Let's not be fathers. We have to be mothers. The mother does not think. The mother does not think that I'm doing this for this child so that the child will grow up and will look after me in the future. It doesn't think. She doesn't think that way. Now, the father may think that way, but the mother does not think that way. Her love is pure. Her love is selfless. This is the love that Baha'u'llah wants us to show towards his cause. Selfless love, pure motive, whether it's contribution or time or effort. This is the thing that he cherishes, I think, most. A final thought is the question of spirit of service and form of service. I think what God is interested in is spirit. It doesn't matter what you are doing, as long as you're doing it in the right spirit. Look at that tablet of Baha'u'llah on the first day, for the first day of Nowruz. He speaks about two, I'm giving my words, my simple words. I don't have the quotation with me here. But he talks about two people during the fast. One has fasted and one has not fasted. And he says, in the eyes of God, it may well be that the one who has fasted has not fasted. In the eyes of God. Because everything depends upon his acceptance. And in the eyes of God, the one who has not fasted has indeed fasted. This is what Baha'u'llah is saying. The form is somebody gets up every day of the 19 days and fasts. This is the form. The spirit was not there. Baha'u'llah says God does not accept that fast. It is as if he has not fasted and indeed has committed every unseemly act. The other one who has fasted, who has not fasted, he has eaten, God bless him, all throughout the 19 days. But in the eyes of God, he has fasted and has performed every goodly deed. Everything depends upon his acceptance. The form is nothing but a means to an end. It's not the end. It's a means to an end. If I am contributing to the fund, if I'm giving to the ark, this is just a means for me to win the good pleasure of my Lord. Now, with what spirit I do it is important in the eyes of God. Is it with selflessness? Is it with love that I am making my offering? That's important. That's why Shoghi Effendi attaches importance to sacrifice. We are told to recognize the manifestation of God. Okay. We are told to be steadfast in his love. We are also told to obey. But in between this obedience and this recognition, there is love. Not only love, but steadfastness in his love. It means that if I recognize Baha'u'llah, first I must love him. After recognition, I must love him. There should be love in my heart for him. And I must be steadfast in this love. And then when I obey, it should be for love of him again, for the sake of his love. Love runs through it all. And when we talk about contributions, it's the same thing. When we're talking about service, it's the same thing. It's not form, it's spirit. That's what counts. How, why we are serving. Why we are contributing. It should stem from the heart. This is purity of motive. And I can tell you, friends, that all our services depend on purity of motive. This is the foundation. On this we build. On this we are able to win the good pleasure of our Lord. That's what it is all about. I'd like to end my presentation to you by reading this paragraph from one of the letters of the House of Justice, dated January 1994. And we'll end up bringing our thoughts back to the mountain of the Lord. Mount Carmel was extolled by the prophet Isaiah almost 3,000 years ago, when he announced that it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. Now, with the coming of the Lord of hosts, his devoted servants throughout the world have been summoned to the momentous undertaking with which the fulfillment of this ancient promise is associated. As they dedicate themselves to this mighty task, let them draw inspiration from these words of Baha'u'llah. Carmel, in the Book of God, hath been designated as the hill of God. as his vineyard. It is here that by the grace of the Lord of revelation, the tabernacle of glory hath been raised. Happy are they that attain thereunto. Happy they that set their faces towards it. Beloved friends, I wanted to just say that you may have heard that there have been informal gatherings of some of the friends, and that I have attended such gatherings. I want to tell you that it is true. I have done that. The reason why I accepted these invitations was because I found out that these friends were more of the well-to-do friends. And I thought that it was important for me to particularly explain to them, underline for them, the importance of this appeal. That's why I accepted. I hope this is clear. The House of Justice has not asked me to confer, to bestow any privileges on anybody. I have done this only for this purpose. I wanted you to understand this, please. And then I'm going to say a few words in my broken French. How about that? To address the friends from Québec. Alors, je veux vous dire quelques mots en mon français rouillé. Je veux vous dire que vraiment, je voudrais beaucoup visiter Québec, et particulièrement Montréal. Mais je n'avais pas le temps. C'est pourquoi, cette fois-ci, ce n'était pas possible pour moi de voyager chez vous. Mais je suis sûr que vous comprenez très très bien l'importance que Abdul Baha a attachée à Québec, parce que c'était la seule province qu'il a lui-même visitée. Et c'était à Montréal. Et donc, c'est une bénédiction très spéciale pour les amis de Québec. Ils ont, je crois, une responsabilité, pas seulement la bénédiction, mais la responsabilité aussi. Et puis, vous avez à Montréal le Baha'i Shrine. C'est le seul Baha'i Shrine qui existe, pas seulement au Canada, mais dans toute l'Europe, dans toute l'Amérique du Nord. Et cette désignation a été donnée par le gardien lui-même pour ce shrine, parce que Abdul Baha a visité cette maison bénie. Et vous avez la responsabilité donc de préserver, de protéger cette institution spirituelle. Vous avez donc deux responsabilités, responsabilité spirituelle et responsabilité administrative. Je vais visiter aussi en Europe les amis en Belgique et nous espérons que des Baha'is de France vont venir à Bruxelles. Et on m'a demandé de dire quelques mots en français. Alors, vous voyez comment je parle français. Vous devez prier pour moi. Quand je serai à Bruxelles dans 4 jours, ou bien 5 jours, je pourrai adresser les amis aussi en français, ainsi qu'en anglais. C'est plus facile pour moi un peu. Alors, mille merci.
How many more years or months until the expected completion of the Ark project?
Right on the point. It is the hope of the House of Justice that the Ark project, in all its phases, will be completed by the end of this century. This is the present plan.
It says, can I give gold instead of cash?
Of course.
Can individuals describe in full detail their financial situations to the Universal House of Justice or its representative and ask the Supreme Institution to decide how much is appropriate for them to give? For example, give a blank check and have the Universal House of Justice put the figure on the blank check.
It is an impossible situation. The House of Justice will never, I'm not the House of Justice, but from my experience and in the work of the House of Justice, I can assure you the House of Justice will never, ever do that. Never. Why? Because this is relinquishing a basic responsibility on the part of the individual believer. God wants us to grow, to develop spiritually. The House of Justice cannot do this, impose itself on your life, on your personal life. No, it will never do that. It has never done it, as far as I know, for the last 32 years. It leaves all these things to the individual so that through our decisions and actions, the actions that we take, we draw nearer to Baha'u'llah. That is the whole secret of life. That's the whole challenge of life. When Mr. Olinga, the hand of the cause of God, at that time he was not a hand, visited the beloved guardian in Haifa, Shoghi Effendi told him that every seeker should pass through 3 stages. First, the seeker is attracted to the cause. Second, he accepts the cause and is converted to it. Third, he becomes consecrated to that cause. And the 3 stages were summed up by Shoghi Effendi as attraction, conversion, and consecration. And he tells us here that the Canadian Baha'i community should forge ahead with exemplary consecration so that there will be an example to the rest of the world. I've often thought about this until I read these words of the beloved guardian. He wrote these words about 2 months and a week or so after the passing of Abdul Baha. And Amatul Baha Ruhiya Khanum has quoted these words of the beloved guardian in her priceless pearl. It's not January 1922. He wrote, "The time has come for the friends the world over to think not as to how they should serve the cause, but how the cause should be served. There is a subtle difference here between the two positions. I would like to read that passage again. The time has come for the friends the world over to think not as to how they should serve the cause, with my emphasis, but how the cause should be served. In the first position, the center is the individual. He says, all right, depending upon my circumstances, I'll see what I can do, and so on and so forth. He becomes the center. The cause must turn around him or her. In the second position, the cause of God is the center, and the individual revolves around, circles around the cause of God to see what it needs at any given time. For this condition to be attained, one has to be in love with the cause of God. It is not anymore enough to believe in the cause of God and recognize the manifestation of God. One should love the manifestation of God. Love me that I may love thee. So recognition by itself seems to be not enough, insufficient. It has to be supported by love. Love for the manifestation of God. We should learn how to love Baha'u'llah. In one of his passages in the Gleanings, Baha'u'llah says, after the recognition of the manifestation of God, the two obligations that follow are steadfastness in his love and obedience to his commands. So you see, it's not only love, but it is steadfastness in one's love for Baha'u'llah, because there are many tests that come our way, and we should be able to withstand these tests and overcome them. And as a result of these tests, our love for Baha'u'llah should intensify. The flame should burn more fiercely. So he says, steadfastness in one's love. This reminds me of a little story that I have made up. This story, however, is based on one of the statements made by Abdul Baha in one of his tablets. And it also reminds me of the well-known prayer of Baha'u'llah. I know not, O my God, what the fire is which thou didst kindle in thy land. And so the story goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a piece of iron buried somewhere in a valley. And a Baha'i teacher passes by and picks up that piece of metal and tells, we have to, of course, at this point, credit this piece of metal with intelligence and with a soul, with a human soul. And so the teacher tells this piece of metal, you know, I want to tell you about the fire which is raging and blazing in the world of existence. Are you interested? He says, yes. He says, let's get along. I'll show you. They walk, and from a distance, they see some smoke. And he says, you see that smoke? Wherever there is smoke, there is fire. And at that point, some teachers are so much in haste that they produce the declaration card and say, well, since you have accepted that there should be some fire, why don't you sign the declaration card? But it's really too soon at that point. So let's get along with the story. The teacher says, this is not enough. Let us approach the fire. And say they walk a little, and now they hear the crackling of the fuel, or if you like, the branches of the trees. He says, do you hear? He says, yes. This is fire. He says, this is not enough. Let's approach it a little bit more. And he sees the flame. Do you see it? Yes, I do. He says, this is not enough. Let's get just a little bit closer. And he feels the warmth. And he is warm himself after being cold. At that point, if he produces a declaration card, it seems to me it's all right. The story is not finished. I'm continuing the thought of Abdul Baha. The teacher says, you know, my friend, let us throw ourselves into the fire. And he accepts. And they jump into the fire. And you know what happens to this metal? This metal, which was dark, suddenly becomes luminous. It changes its color. It sheds off the skin of rust which surrounded it. It becomes luminous like the fire. So much so that it is difficult to distinguish where the metal ends and where the flame begins. This, I think, is consecration. It is this transformation which God expects each one of us to reach and not stop at stage 2, but acquire the qualities of fire, so that this fire will burn within us, so that in everything we do, wherever we go, whatever we say, will be a manifestation of that fire, a reflection of that fire. This, I believe, is consecration. This, I believe, is when we put the cause first and not ourselves first. This is when we have our priorities in the right order.
Does money or contributions which are given to Hukukullah find their way to such undertakings as the Ark? And a similar question in that vein is, how does the hukuk itself relate to the ever givings to the Ark Fund?
You know, the Hukukullah Fund and the Ark Project both have the Universal House of Justice, of course, involved, because the ultimate recipient of Hukukullah is the House of Justice, and the ultimate recipient of the contributions to the Ark Fund is the House of Justice. So I can see why this question is being asked. Hukukullah, as you know, is 19% of one's assets after all expenses have been paid. It is really your net savings that you have set aside. 19% of that, Baha'u'llah says, does not belong to you. The 19% belongs to God. In one of his tablets, Baha'u'llah says, there are some friends who have imprisoned. He uses the word imprisoned. The Persian word is the simple word habs. He says some of the friends have imprisoned the Huququllah and don't pay it. This is what Baha'u'llah says. And this is something which only God knows, between you and God. There is an exemption related to Huququllah. Up to so many misqals of gold, if you have less than that, you are exempt from Huququllah. But as soon as it goes beyond this, then 19% doesn't belong to you. When it comes to contributions, it's a totally different situation. The situation is this, that from your income, not from your assets, not from your savings, from your regular income, your monthly income, your weekly income, whatever it is, we are called upon to make sacrifices. The Huququllah is not a sacrifice. Please understand this. Please appreciate this. Huququllah is not a sacrifice. Huququllah is money set aside, and Baha'u'llah says, only 81% belongs to you. Sacrifices are involved in contributions from income. As you are receiving the income, you deprive yourself, you deny yourself certain comforts, certain joys, certain things you would like to do, and as Abdul Baha said, things that ye love, would like to have, you like to keep, you sacrifice that for the sake of Baha'u'llah. You let go. You put Baha'u'llah first in your daily life, even if you are poor. I read to you the passages from the writings about the poor. So even when one is poor, a poor man does not pay Huququllah. But a poor man must, Sugar Effendi says, and he does not use the word should. And there is a difference between must and should. Must contribute. That's about the contributions to the ark. Now, there are certain times, certain periods in the history of the faith. For example, I would like to repeat what I said. At the time of the Mashr al-Askar in Ashgabat, Abdul Baha wrote to friends. He said, if you have anything for Huququllah, anything for the World Center, some people set aside money or a property, they say, as and when I will sell this property, I want this money to go to Haifa. This is fine. Or you know that you owe Huququllah, and that Huququllah is imprisoned in that particular property, and you don't want to sell it now. There is an emergency. Abdul Baha writes to the friends in Iran. He says, we have an emergency in Ashgabat. So if you have anything intended for Haifa, even if it is a piece of property, sell it. If you have set it aside, if you owe it as Huququllah, sell it now. There is an emergency. Why? Because the important should always be sacrificed for the most important. You have to look at this whole problem. You will then understand. Now, the Huququllah has helped the art project in the past. Whenever there was some shortage, the Huququllah Fund has helped. But every time it has done this, it has been at the cost of depriving some National Assembly from assistance given to it, some vital national project somewhere in the world, some important Baha'i book to be published somewhere and needs support, and we don't have the money to support it, some new creative idea for teaching that could be pursued in some area, we cannot do it. It has been at the cost of these things that money has gone to the art project. But at this time, the amount is so large that we cannot cover it anymore from the Huququllah Fund, from the Baha'i International Fund. This is why the House felt it was urgent, it was its duty to share this problem with the Friends and leave it to their consciences. They want to have the joy of participating now. They want to step forward. God bless them. They want to sell property that they have already dedicated to the cause. God bless them. This is a crisis we are facing. And if we had been able to cover it from the Huququllah Fund, there would have been no need for a member of the House to come all the way from Haifa. In Zaire, you know, it's a country afflicted by disease, poverty, and almost virtual absence of communications. The members, the delegates to the convention, have to walk to the convention. And it's not a walk of 2 or 3 hours, it's a walk of 3 or 4 or more days. And they carry their food with them on their heads, and they come to the convention. They come there and they read the message of the House of Justice, which has been shared with you all, about the 40 million shortfall. So the delegates decided to recommend to the National Assembly that the National Assembly adopt a goal of 1 unit for this last year of the 3-year plan for the entire Zairean community. Then the delegates say, but we are here, we're gathered. How about us? Shouldn't we make our best? And so they start singing. And while singing, the report says they emptied their pockets. And at the end, when the collection was put together, it was the equivalent of $125 with a wristwatch. That was it. Now, for a member of the House of Justice to go to Kinshasa to urge the Friends to contribute more, yes, they may contribute 3 more wristwatches maybe, or something like that. That's all. This is their capacity. This is their potential. They can't do better than this. We heard from Ruhiya Khanum that there was a piano teacher in Chicago, and she made regular contributions for the temple in Wilmette. Ruhiya Khanum said that her mother, Mrs. Maxwell, went to this dear lady and told her, "Have you seen the temple?" She said, "No." "But why?" she asked. "Oh, I cannot afford it." So Mrs. Maxwell took her, herself, to Wilmette. And as soon as she saw this beautiful temple, she said, "Oh, my darling, this is love. This is consecration. This is self-sacrifice. This is the component that we have to add to our contribution. This, I think, is the time when he will accept it, because he's looking for purity, purity of heart, purity of motive, self-sacrifice.
If one is relatively wealthy, that is, one's needs are completely taken care of, how can one truly sacrifice in the path of Baha'u'llah's love?
Yes. I've never really been rich, I don't know. But I tell you, this is a very important question. I will reword it in a more simpler way. How can a rich person know that they are sacrificing for Baha'u'llah? The poor, it's very easy for them to know whether they are sacrificing or not. How can a rich man, a rich person, know whether they are sacrificing for Baha'u'llah? First of all, let me tell you, when there is true love, as I tried to give the example of the mother, do you think the mother ever thinks that she is sacrificing anything for the child? No. As far as the mother goes, this is nothing. To spend a sleepless night, to worry a little bit, to run to the telephone and phone the doctor to come because the child is crying or has a pain of some kind that she cannot identify. Now, to consider this as sacrifice, she never thinks of it as sacrifice. Why? Because it's true love. True love. Where there is true love, there is no sacrifice, considered as sacrifice. But this question of the rich person, you see, if the poor man, it's hurting him because he doesn't have the money. And Abdul Baha tells him, to solve your problem, you have to contribute. It hurts him to go and pick his objects of ornaments and frames and go and sell that for the sake of Baha'u'llah. It hurts him, but he does it. Now, there should be a point where the rich man is hurt by something. You see, when he does that and it hurts him, then I think we are the beginning this process of sacrifice. And believe me, without that element of sacrifice, I don't know how he works up there, but I think that it's very doubtful that between two contributions, however large they may be, one with sacrifice, one as an extra little thing that I really do not need, let them have it. Between these two, certainly the first one with sacrifice is the one that he cherishes far more than the second one, which is just given in order to respond to this guy who has come from Haifa.
Dear Mr. Nakhjavání, could you please elaborate more on the physical calamity mentioned in your lecture and other Baha'i writings? The second, with much hesitation, I ask this, but if you may, please clear this confusion for me. Will the greatest calamities come before or after the lesser peace? Where may I find references? Thank you.
Yes, the question of calamities and wars and turmoil and so on, whether they come before the lesser peace or after the lesser peace and so on, I don't think you will find any references, specific references, in the writings on this subject, as far as I know. The House of Justice itself is not a prophet. It does not make predictions. That's not its sphere of responsibility. It is the head of the faith, it's true, but it does not make predictions. But as intelligent Baha'is, you should think that certainly between now and the end of the century, there must be more suffering for an unrepentant humanity. How can we visualize? How is it possible to conceive that the lesser peace is going to be just round the corner and that's it? It won't be like that. There's going to be more turmoil, many more commotions and convulsions in the world, no question. Physically, economically, socially, and otherwise. but also to think that the lesser peace is going to be complete cessation of all kinds of military warfare. That also is naive. Why? I quoted in my presentation a passage from the writings of Shoghi Effendi to the effect that the lesser peace, after it has emerged or after it has been established, must consolidate itself. So there is a period of development, of evolution for the lesser peace. You see, during that period, many things might happen. The difference is, whereas before it was chaos and confusion as we see it today, after the establishment of the lesser peace, there will be a world authority that would look at things. There will be a point of reference, an effective point of reference for nations to turn to. And the decisions of that body will be able to force people to accept, if not some kind of military intervention will take place, just as it took place, we saw in our own lifetime, just a few years ago, in the case of the Gulf War. It was not an engagement that 1, 2, 3 countries were occupied with or involved in. It was a decision taken by the Security Council of the United Nations. It was under that umbrella that action was taken. It was a very important development. And the House of Justice drew attention to this very point at the time in one of its messages. So this aspect of United Nations will be, of course, reinforced, and it will be able to intervene on an international level in such situations. But to think that we're not going to have any guns around, that we're not going to have any kind of civil war, internal civil wars, that's not correct, I think. We're going to have it, but it will continue on different levels until this lesser peace consolidates itself.
Is the completion of the ark related to the covenant? If so, how?
Yes, I think it is very much related to the covenant, because the head of our faith at this time is the point to which we turn under the covenant of Baha'u'llah. When the House of Justice is summoning the friends to do certain things, we cannot just turn a deaf ear and say, well, Baha'u'llah knows I cannot pay anything, and just do nothing about it. I am telling you, friends, with the decision of the House of Justice that the members should come to North America and Europe, excuse me to put it in these words, but they are, by this very action, by virtue of this decision, they are inflicting a test on you. That's what it is. You are being confronted with a test. I hate to put it in those words, but believe me, this is the real truth. And you have to say, all right, here I am, a believer in Baha'u'llah, a lover of Baha'u'llah. What am I going to do? So this question you ask yourself, and you have to respond. And it is your responsibility between you and your Lord. And no one else can interfere in that sacred relationship.
What steps can a person take to become consecrated if they believe in the cause of God but are not consecrated yet?
As to this question of consecration and how to attain consecration, I tell you that it is impossible for us to attain consecration without the help of God. It is a combination between our personal will the exercise of our personal will and the confirmations of God. When the two meet, then there is a transformation that takes place. But you need that help of God. It is like asking God to hold your hand. Oh God, hold thou my hand. But supposing your hand is in your pocket and you say, oh God, help thou, guide me, hold thou my hand. Do you think he's going to hold your hand? I'm not God, but I'm telling you, he's not going to hold it. Because it's in your pocket. But bring out your hand, extend it towards him. Pray him, supplicate him. Not only with words, but with deeds. Beg him. He will hold your hand and he will guide you for the rest of your lives. Be sure.